Welcome to the Coach's Table Podcast, where coaches come to grow personally and professionally through real-world application and online education. What is going on, guys? Happy Thursday. A little mini Friday today. The weekend is just right around the corner, and we are getting to the last stretch of the basketball season, which is exciting because this is where games really matter, and this is where things get really fun as well. But before we get started with today and today's guest, let's get the administrative stuff out of the way. Guys, if you get one of three things from an episode like this, so if you get educated, if you get entertained, or if you get – I can't remember the last one, but that's all right. I totally blanked on that one. That's all right, though. So if you just get entertained, educated, do us a huge favor, like, subscribe, share. That would be awesome. If you're watching on YouTube, we do this on YouTube, so drop us a comment. That would be awesome. Would really appreciate it. Entertained is the last one. There we go. Appreciate that a lot because that's how we grow and that's how we share the show. So if you would please share the show, would absolutely appreciate that. So for today's guest, man, this is going to be a good one. This is going to be awesome because, she has a lot to offer, and I think she's extremely intelligent. And, she's just going to kind of wow you guys here a little bit today. So Vic, she is the women's basketball strength and conditioning coach at VCU. How are you today?
Hello. Thanks for having me on. I'm doing all right. Can't complain.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, appreciate you. Appreciate your time coming on. I think it's absolutely awesome to have people on that, kind of do similar things, but also have different thought processes as well. So if you would kind of tell everybody, if you don't know her, you should know her. Okay. If you don't after this episode, you will. So if you would kind of tell us a little bit about like how you got in the industry, what kind of drove you to be a strength and conditioning coach, and then more specifically, why kind of basketball?
Yeah. So this kind of started back in 2013 when I played softball at Utah State. Was there from 2013 to 2017. I was under some amazing strength coaches, Dave Scholes, Joey Berglis, Joe Powell, Alan Bishop, James Blackburn, Derek Owens, phenomenal people, phenomenal humans, phenomenal coaches. And they kind of helped me guide and direct towards where I am now. So I actually originally was going into physical therapy. I had all my courses, I had my prereqs, I had my internship hours, my clinical hours, I applied, I spent a crap ton of money. And then I got into a small school in California, and there was just like something off about it. It felt weird, kind of like a, pit in my stomach.
Yeah.
And I was like, I don't think I want to do this. And, I didn't know what I wanted to do. So for 8 months, I was kind of just at home sitting like, what the heck do I want to do? Like, what did I enjoy at my time, through these 20 something years of life. And I really enjoyed the weight room. I really enjoyed the aspect of like coaching and talking and building relationships and helping grow something bigger than myself. So I interned at a small D2 in California with Chase Sanders, who was actually a GA when I was a softball player at Utah State. So I kind of got the connection there. He's phenomenal. He really helped me. I was there for 6-7 months. And then I got my graduate assistantship at Northern Arizona University. I was there for about 2 years. I got my master's in educational psychology. I think I got my full first time job at St. Louis University working with, five sports, and then assisting with both basketballs. I had like 200 student athletes. This was like time of COVID. I was stressed. They built a whole other weight room in the garage. I was in the garage. It was freezing. Like if it was under 32 degrees, we wouldn't work out. But if it was like 34, we would. Yeah. I was there for about a year, and then I was lucky enough to talk to Jenna Reddy, and she was like, "Hey, we actually have an opening at Wake Forest. I'm headed to Clemson." So went through the interview process, got the positioning at Wake Forest as the director of women's basketball. Yeah. And then our head coach got let go. So then kind of trickles down. I got let go. And then landed a spot here at VCU. So made my way all the way east from the West Coast, California native. So it's quite the journey.
Yeah. How's that been for you? I know there's the rivalry between, West Coast is the best coast, and then, everybody talks about East Coast. I love the East Coast. I've actually I've been to California once. I've been to Arizona twice, and that's about as far west as California's as far as west as I can go. But it was for the military, and like we spent the entire month in the desert. So to say I've seen California, absolutely not. Been to Phoenix and Tucson in Arizona. So tell me about the West Coast. Everybody kind of talks about how great it is.
It is phenomenal. But it's funny, you'll talk to the East Coasters or like Texans and they'll say
Yeah,
how
yeah,
bad it is.
yeah.
Um, will I ever live there again? Probably not, unless I'm
Mhm.
making like millions of dollars because it's so expensive. It's
Yeah,
overpopulated and it's
yeah,
polluted.
yeah,
But it is home. That's where all my
yeah,
family is.
yeah,
You can beach, you can hike, you can ski, you can go to the vineyards, you can go to the deserts, like you can do everything there, and I love it.
yeah.
Disneyland is my favorite place in the whole wide world.
Really?
Um, oh hell yeah, it's amazing. I love it. Probably because I've had a pass since I was like 3, but
Yeah,
it's just very nostalgic. It's very like
yeah,
this is who I am. This is how I came to be, which kind of can explain a little bit of my antisocial abilities. But it's helped me become who I am, a powerful Latina woman who wants to succeed in the world. And do I miss tacos? Of course I do.
yeah,
I miss some like really good Mexican
yeah,
food, but I'll always say the West Coast is better. The East Coast is
yeah,
different for sure.
yeah.
The humidity is something else. When
Sure.
I was in North Carolina, I was like, this is insane. And the
Yeah.
summer here, it just like sticks to you.
Mm,
But I'm adapting. I enjoy it. I
yeah.
have yet to see the beaches, honestly, and that's my fault. So I got to get out
Sure.
there
Yeah.
uh, to the coast and take a look
Yeah.
at it. But
That's
West Coast is
awesome.
where it's at, man.
Yeah, that's awesome. I think you got to get to the beaches one for sure. I've heard great things. I love the East Coast personally. Like I lived in Georgia, it was amazing. I loved Georgia. Texas, I loved Texas. Wow, did I love Texas? I loved living there, so it was great. But yeah, there's just so much. I've never really been out the West Coast. Maybe I should go out there. I hate the ocean. I'm deathly afraid of the ocean. So I literally won't go past waist deep in the ocean. Because like I watch so much of the Shark Week and I love it. I'm just like, some of these sharks are gonna come and get me because they swim right up there, and I'm just like, I'm good, I'm good on that. I'm not gonna do that.
I'm 100% on the page. I hate the ocean. Like, I will not go into it. I'll go deep enough. Like,
Yeah,
if I gotta use the restroom or something, but that's about it. Like, I won't mess with it. Kind of get some like sea salt on my legs. That's about it.
yeah,
I appreciate what's in the ocean. I'll keep it out there. I'm not messing
yeah.
with it.
I respect that's their natural habitat, and
Yep.
I won't compete in there at all. So cool, awesome. So what I'm really interested is from your basketball perspective. Love the game of basketball. I think basketball is absolutely outstanding. Kind of talk us through like what your day to day looks like, and then what your training looks like. And maybe we just start with one question: like, what's your day to day look like, uh, being just women's basketball?
Yeah, so it varies based off the day, based off the time of the year. But for instance, we'll kind of
Mm,
just go over with what I'm doing right now in
yeah,
season. We're practicing every day essentially, except for that one day off that we have probably after a game. Our main meat and potato time frame is about 1 to 4, so that's when we'll get lift and practice in at some point.
sure.
Throughout the day, I'll see athletes, but essentially it'll start around 9:15, where we have a meeting with coaches. That'll be a practice plan meeting. So I have my 5 to 8 minutes of fame there, where we
Heck
talk
yeah.
about what that game looked like before, from a mileage standpoint, from a training load standpoint, what the week
Yeah.
looks like,
Mm,
what practice is supposed to look like. Give them an outline. I'll never say, hey, this is what you should do, as opposed to like, I don't suggest we do ODO for 28 minutes. You know what I
yeah.
mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
What I say is just kind of an opinion, to an extent of a guideline. And some days it goes perfect and it looks great, and other days, based off of the 3 minutes of practice, the whole script will change.
Yeah.
But that's where it'll go from 9 to 9:15. Sometimes I'll see athletes if they need some extra work, stretching. If the AT and I need to get together with an athlete from a return to play standpoint, what's
Hmm.
going on? What can we do? Are you going to BFR them? Okay, well, for lift, I'll take them. You do this. For practice, I'll do this.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just talking logistics. And then if I have a slot of like 30, 45 minutes, I get to lift. Um, if not, then I kind of just do the administration work of, all right, I have to do receipts from all the stuff we just bought for the games. I have to make sure, everything's put up, stocked up, our nutrition's good. Okay, got to make sure we got the meal set up for our next away game or our home game, get with our chef here. And then just doing some more GPS training, data stuff. Kids will usually start to roll in around 11:45, and then I'll start to take them for stretching or any like small tissue issues. And then I'll do all of their hand grips. So we have like an old exercise fizz, like hand grip dynamometer.
Sure.
And that's what I use right now from a central nervous system fatigue standpoint.
Okay.
We do that every single day before practice, before their first intense movement on the court or in the weight room, to see what that looks like. Tracking that every day, and then we'll go into practice. Have to get their polars ready, getting the hydration ready, and then just making sure there's no extra needs with coaches. So everyone's on the court by 12:50, taking shots up. I'll rebound, do whatever, just create small talk, and then start our day.
So I'm glad you brought up the hand dynamometer thing, because I'm actually very interested in that. We have force decks that we use twice a week, and I typically do it the day before a game. Only because of the fact that I can't take that on the road, obviously, right? So we've kind of had our like SOP of doing it the day before the game to assess like central nervous system, 24 hours out. So can you talk to us about like what you see with the hand dynamometer? If you're doing it every single day, I'm sure that you can see trends. You can see, day before a game, obviously day after the game, 2 days, 3 days. Like what have you kind of seen from that? And do you think a hand dynamometer is worth it, particularly in the basketball world, just because of the fact that like we can take it on the road, right? And it's not that compact and it's not that big and it doesn't take up that much space. And like, kind of, what's your experience been with that?
It's still a process working with it.
Yeah.
The biggest trend I'll see, honestly, is when I measure them in the morning for like pregame and stuff. Like when we have morning games, like, oh, it's tanked, it's horrible. I can also see like based off of the way they're walking, I'm like, oh, they're gonna probably trend low.
Really?
And it'll happen. I've seen athletes who consistently hit, their average, and then all of a sudden just drop off for about 4 or 5 days. And I'm like, yo, what's up? How's it going?
Sure.
We had a kid who was consistently hitting like 110, which based off the gauge, it goes from like 0 to, I don't know, maybe 220 or something, and that's in pounds. So they're squeezing, and she got about 110, which is pretty good for a female athlete in her age range. And then she dropped to like 80 consistently. She was having some home trouble, some mental health issues and things like that we were able to address and find, which I thought was pretty cool, because can it predict injury? I think it can help us guide towards, when an athlete's not fully engaged, which can create, right, that mental lapse of when you land or when you have to accelerate and you're not ready, or your CNS isn't completely like engaged in whatever we're doing.
Sure.
And so I definitely think it helps in that facet, but it's interesting because I'm now tracking like practices, games, and then game days, like what that looks like. And game days seem to be trending lower than their average, which I think is interesting. And I don't know exactly what that entails. Maybe it's the time to which I'm actually doing their grip, or maybe it's they're not naturally aroused and they're a very low arousal team. And there's a lot of things that play into it that I'm not. Me and the AT are kind of just working, we're still collecting data.
Yeah.
But one thing I find interesting, and I don't exactly know what it means, but when their right's baseline, but then their left's higher than baseline, right? So their non-dominant exceeds their dominant when they're quote unquote like at their baseline.
Yeah.
Which I think is interesting, because if you think about it, right, like what our left brain controls versus what our right brain controls from a hemisphere standpoint is very analytical versus like creative and things like that. So just something we're looking at. And then our AT is going to measure like injuries that we've had along with what that data looks like. So we'll have a better picture towards the end of the season and end of the year. If it, shows us anything, or if it's just like something that we can gauge, like, hey, so-and-so's, sleeping 3 hours because she's worried about something that's going on at home, or because of a test, or because, whatever it is. but I definitely do think it gives us a little clearer picture into athletes' readiness.
Yeah.
Because those, you know how the wellness scores go, they go as well as how honest and how accurate
Yeah.
the athletes
Yeah.
will actually do them. So
Yep.
it's been it's been a task. I think in the next few
Mm.
steps, I'd like to get the Vald. Vald has one. I was talking to Bishop about it, and theirs is a lot more accurate to an extent where, you
Sure.
know, when they're squeezing, it gives the newtons and it gives it down to a decimal.
Okay.
And it gives all the different metrics from it and different hand positionings. All we
Yeah.
do is they're standing straight up, arm 90 degrees, slightly abducted, and that's kind of how they squeeze.
Yeah.
But I will say we make sure it's consistent. We make sure we're doing it all the same way every day and
Yep.
kind of go from there.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's really interesting to kind of see that. And I think as great as technology is, and I love it because I'm kind of a data nerd and I like just go down these rabbit holes with it. And I'm like trying to find that one thing, if you will. I think, taking a step back, what it allows us to do, and I think put the nailed it right on the head is like, it allows us to have a conversation with the athletes and it allows us to like identify, hey, I've been tracking this on you and now you're low. Like, what's up? Like, and it just like gives you the opportunity to see that and just be like, okay, hey, like, are you okay? Like, do you need to talk to somebody? What does that kind of look like? And it gives you that opportunity to engage with that athlete. And I think what that does, not only just having that conversation, but the engagement of that with the athlete, like allows your relationship with them to get stronger. And then you can say like, oh, okay, like whether it's whatever situation, like you can start to find them the right people to communicate with or to seek help or to get help, which I think is fantastic for us because there's so much things that they're going through that we don't know about, but we can relate to because we were both college athletes as well. And we could be like, oh, I remember when I was playing, but yeah, it's slightly different, but at least like now we have the opportunity to have that conversation with them.
Definitely. And I think, you know, if you want to go down the performance route, the next step would probably be getting a grip and then going right onto a plate, right? Like
Yeah,
the force plate or the Sparta plate that we have and seeing how that looks. But then, you know, to another point, you can even say, well, are they trying, right? Like, are they
sure.
warmed up? Did you do the warm up?
Mm,
I mean, there's just so many rabbit holes you can go down. And in a
yeah,
perfect world, I would like to just continually have athletes that I can run data and test on all this stuff. But I think it's just going to give us a different lens, a different scope into what exactly
yeah,
we're using it for and how that's going to look. I think right now it's more from a injury mitigation and mental health standpoint.
yeah.
And then, you know, seeing where it goes in the next 2, 3 years as we gather more and more information.
Yeah, so that was the next question I was going to ask you was, do you do this in conjunction with the force deck? Or is it just right now the hand dynamometer? Because it's tough. Most people don't have both, right? You kind of have one or the other. And a lot of times that's from a financial side, right? But how are you guys doing? Is it with both? Is it in conjunction? Or is it just kind of?
So right now it's just, so we have Sparta Science as far as our force plate.
Sure.
And right now it's just the hand grip only because I'm not warming them up to jump. I'm not doing anything, honestly, and I don't know how consistent I can do it. So I
Mm,
just don't. I will use Sparta every, you know, month or so, every 3 to 4 weeks,
sure.
just to make sure we're trending in the right direction from a training standpoint.
Yep.
That's really those two I use, and I'm sure, you know, that day I definitely did a hand grip so I can test that and see what that looked like.
Okay.
But as of now, it's not like hand in hand.
Yeah, I got you. That would be, and I agree with you. That would be kind of like the next step is like what you would want to do in the ideal world, because that's what I would want to do as well. Like I
Oh
said, we
yeah,
just have the force deck, so and we're only doing that twice a week. I'm not jumping them every day. We're not training every day like that, so just not
yeah.
just not happening, unfortunately. One thing I'm really interested in. So you have your master's degree in education psychology, right?
Mhm.
How have you seen that be such an advantage for you, coaching athletes? Because a lot of our role, yeah, is this is our reps and our sets and et cetera, et cetera. But I have found our role to be so much more psychological. Not that I'm giving them psychological advice, but just understanding the athlete as a whole and especially in their mental game?
Yeah. So one thing I've done that I've actually taken from my mentor, but I kind of like shifted a little bit
Yeah.
was sitting down with each of the athletes when I first get the position and then continuing it after is we could talk strength conditioning and we will for about 15 minutes, but then after I'm gonna, all right, so then I'll start to ease in, right? Like,
Yeah.
when's your birthday? What's your favorite color? Like, what do you like to do?
Yeah.
How many siblings do you have? This, that, and the third. And then we just kind of start to build a relationship. We just talk.
Mm-hmm.
You'll find more and more that people enjoy talking to strangers than they do their best friends.
Mm.
Not because they trust the stranger, right? But because the stranger can't judge them. Like, you don't know me, I
Mm.
don't know you, so I'm just gonna like whatever. I'm just gonna say this. Think what you want of it.
Yeah.
So actually, my first few conversations I had with a few of these athletes, like day two I got here, I had three of them crying in my office about
Mm.
something personal, right?
Mm.
And it had
Mm.
nothing to do with them trusting me. I mean, maybe now it will,
Yeah.
but it was just like they needed somebody just to talk to and just let it out, and we got all that sorted out. But I think they need to know that you're there for them as a
Mm.
human, and then the athlete will come second.
Yeah.
And I realized that, like, almost even as an athlete before the whole master's degree program. But I will say the educational psychology degree did help me like learn how to converse in a
Mm.
very what's the proper term, in a very empathetic way. I can't
Mm.
say I'm a naturally empathetic person.
Yeah.
So that I struggle with. I struggle, with the emotions. Like if someone's crying to
Sure.
me, I'm kind of like, ugh,
Yeah.
I'm not a
Yeah.
big hugger. Like I'll dab you up, I'll say what's up, but that's like the extent of it.
Yeah.
And so that course really taught me like how to ask questions in a very empathetic manner and how to listen and
Mm.
how to just be very involved, right? Because I didn't know how to do any of that.
Sure.
I'm just, I mean, my dad was like, suck it up, put some dirt on it, right? When I was
Yeah.
crying. So
Yeah.
I missed that whole sentimental piece.
Mm.
So that class really taught me or that degree really taught me how to ask questions and when to listen versus when to speak and things like that that were pretty cool. Because I think, asking questions are pretty influential versus kind of just talking or just being like, oh, like, how does that make you feel? Like,
Mm.
what do you mean? How does it make me feel? I'm bawling my eyes out. Like, it sucks.
You can't see that?
So,
Like,
like,
yeah.
like, like,
Yeah.
just read the room. But I
Yeah.
will say it really taught me how to be empathetic, honestly, and,
Mm.
and have that side. Like as a strength coach, you're always seen as this like stern, hard person with a
Yeah.
whistle, yelling,
Yeah.
getting up at 5 a.m., black coffee through the veins. Like you're a person, like we're
Yeah.
human. Like we're gonna make mistakes. We're gonna
Mm.
fail. Like we have feelings, and for the athletes to see them, I don't think that's a bad thing. I think it's
Yeah.
it's nice that they can actually relate to us now.
Yeah, absolutely. And can I put you on the spot for a minute then? Because
For
I
sure.
think I think what you said is extremely powerful. I really do. I have three H's that I go by, which are handshakes, hugs, and high fives. So every day I give my athletes handshakes, hugs, or high fives. And typically, like the handshake is going to be me dabbing them up, right when they get there. A hug is either going to be like pretty much like right after that dab, right? And then the high fives are going to be throughout the session and all that stuff. But what I want to put you on the spot on, because I think what you said is extremely powerful, and I think a lot of coaches and people in general can take this and learn from it. So what is one or two things that you've learned in regards of like from that course of asking questions that you believe has really like helped you develop relationships with the athletes, like get them to open up, and rather than just being like, oh, I heard what you said, but I had something in my head that I wanted to ask anyway, so I drowned it out, 50% of what you said. Like, what are a couple of practical tips that you think coaches could utilize from what you've learned?
Yeah. Whenever an athlete shares an experience or shares an emotion, I'll always, it's not so much a question, it's me allowing them to know they're valid in what they're feeling because they're hurting, they're in pain, or they're pissed off, right?
Mm.
Like they are mad for whatever reason. I'm like, hey, like I hear you. like you're right. You're valid in what you're feeling. I understand what you're feeling. Um, and then I'll be like, now dig deeper into it. Like, what is that? Like, what does that actually feel like? What are you actually XYZ at? Like, what is it that's like really getting you there? You know?
Mm, mm,
And at first they're like, what do you mean? And then I'll give them like a personal example, and then they're like, oh, and then they'll sit, they'll talk, and then the next thing you know, it's like something deeper. Now I'm not gonna sit here and tell you I'm a therapist in any facet. I
sure.
could never. That's a hard job.
Yeah.
But for the most part, I know sometimes when they start to like brush it off, I'm like, oh no, this is we're getting somewhere. This is good. Like let's keep, talk to me. What's going
Yeah.
on?
Yeah.
Um, and then I think a big thing that athletes or even anybody in general is how people view you is going to dictate how we act.
Mm,
So
okay.
one thing I'll say is like, do you feel like other people think differently of you? Do you feel like you're um, looked at differently because of this? Do you feel like your back's up against the wall? Do you feel like you're by yourself?
Mm,
And that'll kind of help me gauge a little bit more as to what they're feeling and why they might be, butting heads with me in the weight room, or why they might, if I tell them to do X, they do Y, or they're not listening, or this and the other. Kind of coming down to like what our issue is,
mm,
just not necessarily being like, why are you like this? And then
yeah.
another one is like, okay, another thing I'll say, and like, help me understand. Can you help me understand like why this is happening?
Mm,
Because if I just come at them with 200 questions of what they're doing wrong, they're going to probably get combated or shut down.
yeah.
So okay, just help me understand like what's going on, or I'll say, hey, this is my point of view. Like, am I off base?
Mm, mm,
Just different things in that way. That has kind of helped me guide a little bit better as to getting to know them as people, so I can coach them better as athletes.
yeah.
And they know they care. I mean, yesterday I had, or 2 days ago, at a conditioning group. So we do game ready conditioning, so that kids who play less than 15 minutes will have a conditioning session with myself. Obviously, they hate it. They didn't play, and you got to make a condition. You know what
Yeah,
I mean?
exactly.
Like that's
Double
not fair. But
whammy.
at the same
Yeah.
time, we're there. Yeah. So we're doing it, and they're hitting their marks. But we're having like conversations about philosophy and books, and
Mm,
what they're reading and how they're enjoying it and their application, and we're diving into social media and how that's affecting them, and how like it's just, I mean,
mm,
and then they're killing conditioning. Like they're out of breath and they're talking to me. So
yeah.
it's a win-win. And just like, if you can't have those conversations, I think sometimes our job just feels very transactional.
Yeah.
And you kind of lose, like, I love it because I get to create that.
Yeah.
If I wanted just to kind of scream and just be a hard ass, I probably could, but I enjoy this part of my job.
Yeah.
Um, and I
Mm,
think it helps me be better too,
yeah. Yeah. I agree with you. I think, those tips for anybody that's listening, if you didn't catch everything that she just said, what I want you to do is go back, rewind it, and re-listen to that, because I think what she said, the tips, the practical tips that she just gave you, um, are extremely powerful, and you can utilize those not only with your athletes, but in your individual relationships as well, like in your personal life as well. And I think that's extremely powerful because, you know, to that point, like you said, I think it's just at times it can feel so transactional, right? Or at least from the outside looking in, people think it's transactional, and it's not, right. Like, we have the opportunity, and we get the opportunity to develop relationships with, on a basketball team, 15 people or so, roughly, right? Other sports teams larger, but like, you have the ability to develop relationships with all of them, and not only get to know them as an athlete, but more importantly and bigger, like as an individual. Like, who are they as an individual, rather than what can they do from, an athletic perspective, which, yes, we want to improve them athletically, but more importantly, like, we want to help them improve as a person, because we only get anywhere from 1 year, right, to a potential of 5 years with them, right? And that relationship that you build with them over that time period is going to affect them for 40 years. And I think a lot of people, we kind of miss that boat, because we're like, well, we're only here for X amount of years. It's like, your goal should be to still talk to them once they've graduated and 10 years after they've graduated. Like, oh, they invited me to their wedding. That's awesome. You know, like that should be your goal, right? Like you want to see them succeed and flourish and do all that stuff as well, but you can't do that if you don't have a strong relationship with them, right? So flipping the script, another question, because I think this is extremely important as well. What is your kind of line with the tough love component? So I'm a huge believer in tough love. I think it's amazing. I think if we're not on tough people, I am not challenging you to be your best, right? Just like if I have friends that challenge me to be my best, if they're like, oh yeah, that's okay, like don't worry about that, right? Like I know they're not actually helping me, and vice versa. Like how do you kind of balance that emotional and empathetic component to that, and then being like, we're gonna get this freaking work in, and we're gonna get better, and we're gonna push the limit, and we're gonna, you know what I'm saying? Like how do you kind of balance that? What does that look like for you?
Yeah. It's you really got to read the room every single time. So for the most part, that empathetic side comes out a lot less than the other side does. That's for sure. And that's not because I don't know how to use it or because the room is, doesn't call for it, but more because it's like, it's when it's no different when a coach yells, right? Like if you have a coach that just keeps yelling and yelling and yelling and yelling, when they yell again, it's the same thing. Yeah. Like that empathetic side is special. The empathetic side is very like, this is us right now, me, you, like we're getting after it. So that's used very sparingly, and when they need it. But that tough love comes a lot more often. And that's, I told them when I first got here, I said, hey, I will coach you so hard. And I was like, but I will care for you harder. I promise you. Just work with me, Say
that again. Say that again. And for real. No, I'm serious.
Yeah.
That,
I'll coach you hard, but I care for you harder. And so and they know that, my first few weeks, like I was on them. I was on them. I was like, nope, not good enough. Blew the whistle. Nope, not good enough. They were rolling their eyes. They were pissed off. Okay, we got another one. We got another. They're not having it, but that's also because our standard wasn't there. I'm not doing it just to do it, to set a precedent. Like, it's literally because we're not doing it. So, and they understood that. It also helps when you have leadership on a team, when the other seniors are hitting the freshmen, because it's like, what are you doing, bro? Like you're just being a knucklehead. Stop.
Yeah.
Not too long ago, I had an athlete doing the game ready conditioning again, and she was not having it. The poorest effort I've ever seen in my life, just atrocious. Yep. And so I just stopped it. I was like, we're not doing this. And I pulled her in the room, and it was one of those moments where I'm talking to myself. I was like, do I yell? Like, do I make a scene, or do I bring this kid in? And so I sit there and I just stop it, and I'm like, hey, come with me. And so we go into the film room, we start talking, and she just starts break down crying and talks to me about her frustration. And I'm just listening. I'm listening. Hey, I get it. I understand your frustration, and you have every right to be frustrated. And I said, but we're getting better right now. And I was like, this has nothing to do with what you're talking about. I said, I'm not here to make this worse. So I'm not here to punish you. And I was just like, this is to make you, when you get in the game and you play more than 15 minutes and you're running, I need you to be ready for it. Yeah. And on top of that, we track mileage and stuff, and to make sure she's not too behind in miles and all that. So I explained that side, and I said, this is for you. And I said, you can either keep going through this and we'll stop. I was like, I will stop this because it is so bad. I cannot watch it. I was like, or we redo it and get better. And she was like, let's do it again. I was like, all right, let's go. Yeah. And it was just one of those moments where it's I was tussling between myself for a good 5 seconds. I was like, no, this kid, we need to have a talk. We need to get to the root cause of it. Because if not, I was going to keep going on.
Yeah.
But then we have a freshman who comes in and, she's the queen of the court and she's cool. And she was, this kid, number one in her high school, all this. And I was like, all right. So she comes in and she's just dogging it. And I'm like, nope, you're getting tough love. So, and now me and her, everyone keeps joking. She's like, oh, you wait till she's a senior. You're like, she's going to be your best friend. I was like, oh, I know. And I was like, well, right now she's pushing the limits. But it's just knowing that time and place and knowing the athletes. There's some athletes I know I can't scream at because they will probably shut down. Can I get on them? Yeah, but I'm not going to across the court just cuss them out for whatever reason. You just got to know the athletes, the environment, the situation that needs to bring the best out in all of it.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I think that's I think that's really important is that aspect of that, and knowing what athletes you can get on, what athletes you can't. I see that now with the athletes I'm training. We have a guy. He's such a great dude, and he gets dogged on, and he shuts down. Right, not because he can't handle it. Right, I think it's more because he's like such a good person, and he's just going to say yes and keep it moving rather than
Mm-hmm.
trying to rebuttal or anything like that. But he's such a good dude, and he's the hardest worker by far. But like his leadership style isn't vocal, right? He's so much more of a example leader, which is amazing. And so it's like for especially my relationship with him, I hardly yell at him. The only time I like yell is when I'm encouraging him. Otherwise, I don't yell at him. Otherwise, I'll talk to him just like we're talking now. And I get so much more out of him when I do that rather than, just getting after him. And now where there's other guys where two of our freshmen who are really good, they love it when people just get after them. So I'll get after them, but some of the other guys, the older guys, I'll just, hey, let's have a conversation. And I just feel like I get so much more out of them just talking to them like people rather than, getting all hyped up and yelling, and because some of them they just don't respond to that. And so
Yeah.
it's really interesting to kind of see that, especially the differences between the upperclassmen and the younger classmen. So that's really interesting to see. But hey, so one thing that's I'd really like to touch on is the support for women's basketball and women's sports as a whole. At times, unfortunately, it feels and appears as if you guys don't get as much love as you should for whether that's fans, whether that's money or whatever the case may be. Regardless of that, my thing, and I'd like you to speak on this, especially being a woman working in women's sports, is how much you credit you guys deserve, right? And at times, people just don't seem to give that to you guys, and I feel bad about it because you guys put in just as much work, and at times, if not more work. And it feels at times like you have your back up against the wall more frequently than the men's side of the house, which is very unfortunate. So if you would kind of share with me like your experience in the women's sports prior to, because you worked with 5 teams at other schools and men and women, and talk to me kind of about that a little bit. Because I think you guys deserve so much more love than what you're given, and that's sad.
Yeah. No, I appreciate that. And I definitely agree. But I will say there is a shift, right?
Sure.
And I think women's soccer has done a great job in kind of building the way. It's just unfortunate when you get the, Draymond Green speaking on it like, oh, I forgot what comment he said back to Megan Rapinoe, but it's just the fact that there's not enough education in regards to what we're asking for. So are we asking for the exact same cut? Are we asking for the exact same pay, the exact same whatever it is? No, we're asking for the equal amount of percentage. We're asking for like equality amongst what we're given. We're not asking it to be the same. I think those are very two different things.
Sure.
And so you look at sports everywhere, right? You could go women's soccer, women's basketball, softball. I worked swim and dive. I worked track and field. I've worked field hockey, lacrosse. Like it's everywhere. It's prevalent. Some sports are just seen more than others, which kind of has its ups and downs. But I can speak for certain on softball. I mean, I watch it all the time, and especially in the summertime when it starts to come June, they're playing in Oklahoma. Like you see the viewings and you see how awesome it is.
Yes.
But then all of a sudden, like I get to. I'll speak on this. I know one of the Pac-12 teams who are not only high in softball but high in basketball, and I know the pay in which the employees are getting, which is just pennies, absolute pennies, not only in what they deserve, but just among the teams they're working with.
Yeah.
Like, it's insane. You're working with two top 10 teams in the nation
Mm.
and you're getting pennies.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that speaks necessarily the university or the conference or whatever it is, but
Sure.
it's atrocious.
Mm.
Um, and you come to viewings and you have these great games. South Carolina has a line out the door for women's basketball, which is phenomenal.
Yeah.
When I was at Wake Forest, we played at NC State and at Louisville, and it was some of the most entertaining environments I have ever been a part of.
Yeah.
Like, NC State was a freaking club in there. It was a small gym, women's basketball only. I think they might have shared it with volleyball. I'm not sure, but it was packed. There wasn't an open seat. Louisville, no different. Louisville sold out more than the men did.
Yeah.
Like, it was insane, and I loved it. I'm like, why? Like, why can't we have more of this? We go to Miami, and Miami's a great team as well. They made it to the Sweet 16,
Yeah.
and like, they had maybe 100 fans. Like, it's just
Mm.
crazy.
Mm.
All ACC teams, in my opinion, are phenomenal, and they should get sold out. Working at Wake, working here, like, I will say the crowd here is getting better and bigger, and I think it helps when you win. It helps when you're successful. It
For
helps when you have
sure.
really good players. But I don't know if it's necessarily environmentally where you're at or the program's history, but it needs to grow. It needs, and I will say the men's side here does a great job in supporting. Like, you'll see the coaches, you'll see the men's athletes there, and I think
Yep.
when you can get those who do get supported, like the men's side who constantly get supported, whether it's football, men's basketball, baseball, whatever it is,
Yep.
top tier promoting that. I mean, that's what we need to. We can't just be siloed like men's and women's. Like, I know our ladies go to men's sports and vice versa. So I think that's awesome.
Yeah.
But we need it to be more collaborative. We need to make sure, like, it is awesome. WNBA should be selling out no different than the NBA. WNBA is phenomenal to watch. Like, the amount of games they play in the season they have, and like age range, and they're playing overseas because they're not making the amount they need to support whatever life they're living. Like, it's crazy. It's
Yeah.
unfortunate, and for whatever reason that disconnect is happening, I just think awareness is good, but action needs to follow. And if we don't have necessarily an action plan, like, all right, maybe maybe we need to start creating one, whatever that looks like. If we already have it, like, all right, where's the disconnect, right? Like, why does this keep happening?
Yeah.
I didn't know this, but we had like 28,000 students here at VCU,
Wow.
which I thought we were like 10,000 at best.
Yeah.
But we have like up into the 20s.
Wow.
And I'm looking at our stands and I'm like, where's our students?
Yeah.
Like, where's the support? Like, is it our fault? Are we not promoting it? Are we not doing this? Like, trying to figure out where that disconnect is. Is it our game times? Is it because you guys don't know we're playing? Is it because they don't know that we even have a women's basketball? You know what I mean? So it's frustrating. It's hard, and I think the more we promote it, the more we like keep pushing it. Like, I hope it'll get better. I think women's sports is starting to become more popularized, promoting even from men's side. Like, you'll see men wearing the WNBA logo on the t-shirt. That's awesome. Or the WSL or NSL, whatever that is. And just got to keep pushing and keep hoping that, we keep knocking on the door and someone's going to answer. Because if not, we're going to start putting our foot through it.
No, yeah. I love that. I really do. I think if you're a male athlete or male coach and you coach men, right, I think you should go and support your women counterparts. I firmly believe that. I understand, like, let's use basketball as an example. I understand probably at times where it's like the women are home and the men are away. So obviously, like, you're not going to teleport to that. Duh. But you should still, like, when you can, and make a concerted effort to do that, because I go to our games here and see the women's teams and the men's teams, if we're not playing on the same night. And, the women's players would be in the stands watching the men's play, when they don't play, obviously, like when they have the ability to. And I think that's really cool. And then what's awesome about here is that you'll see the same thing on the opposite side. So we'll get a big chunk of our players to go and support the women as well, when we're not playing or whatever the case may be, which is awesome. So I think we should support you guys more. I think people need to know more about that, about women's sports, and not just basketball, but women's sports in general. Women's softball is electric. women's volleyball
Oh,
is electric.
oh yeah, that's great.
When I was at Louisville for my graduate program, I was working with their volleyball team, and they were super good. They've been really good like the last 5 years, like phenomenal.
Yeah.
And they would sell out every single game, and it was electric. Like women's volleyball is absolutely electric. I absolutely love it. It's so fun to watch.
Yeah.
They're so energetic. The sport is just so interesting in itself, and then the fans are, diehard fans. If they had bigger stadiums, I think they would continue to sell out, just because like it's just so fun to watch.
Oh, I don't doubt it. And I mean, like I said, it helps to win, right? It
Yep.
helps to be
Mm-hmm.
competitive. It helps to have great games.
Mm-hmm.
So that plays a big part. I mean, I don't expect people to come to like a 0-20,
Sure.
facility or anything like that, but it's a you got to keep pushing.
Yeah. So if I can continue down this path, specifically in the strength and conditioning field, over the last several years, there's been a bigger push for women coaches, which I think is awesome. And I think there's also been a bigger push for minority coaches, which I think is awesome as well. And you being a Latina woman, can you kind of talk to me about your experience in the strength and conditioning field where there's not, it's obviously a male dominated field, right? But I think women bring an amazing like instinct to them from a coaching standpoint that at times is way better than what men can do, right? Because we're so like we just got to get after it. And I think you guys at times, and I think you guys at times are way smarter than we are too, in all honesty, and more times than not. So can you kind of talk to me about your experience with that so far, and then what you recommend for women in the field? Because I think you guys need more love as well.
Oh, well, you said it, not me. All right. No. I think this question is interesting, and I
Sure.
get it asked a lot
I bet.
from being a
Yeah.
female to Hispanic and all that. You know, I go back and forth, right? Like I want to be hired because I'm the best applicant.
Yes.
I want to be hired because you looked at my resume, we had an interview, and
Yep.
you're like, this is the person, regardless of me being female or whatever. For sure.
Correct.
Now to the other point of we need to hire because our pool looks the same. Our pool is the exact same. Everybody looks the same. Nobody's represented other than the same 10 that are here, right? And I think we will get better. We will be better as people in diverse cultures.
Yes.
From the way we think, from the way we act, from the way we can relate, from our relationships to everything.
Mm-hmm.
I think diversity breeds growth, great environments, 110%.
Mm-hmm.
Now you can get both of them.
Sure.
Hell yeah, right? I put out this application process for a GA. We're looking for a GA this year, and I got a bunch of resumes. And it was interesting, maybe location, but of the resumes, I think of the 40 I got, like 3 were female. Which I thought was really interesting because I'm like, I'm pushing for females. Like, yeah, for sure. Is this a female only position? No. Like,
right.
Let's see the applicants. Let's see our best, offers. We'll go from there.
Right.
But of the 43 are female, so that's one of 36.
Yeah.
Or so, like 3 out of 40. Like that's crazy. So then of that, like I think our applicants for minorities was like 2 who were men. So then, it's just interesting because it's like, who's applying? Like, how many do we actually have? Is it because our female minorities, let's just put
Sure.
female minorities, not applying because they don't see as many represented and they feel intimidated, so they're just not going to bother? Or, are they just already all taken? From a minority standpoint, men or women, like, do they also feel misrepresented in that facet as well? And then for females, like, what, 3 out of 40, whatever that ratio is, like, why aren't you replying? Like, what is it? Just the timing? Like this year, there's just more males graduating for CSCS and there's females. Like, what's the candidate pool look like? Is it just because it's Richmond, Virginia? It's it's too far from home, perhaps. I don't know.
Sure.
Obviously, I want to see successful humans grow and develop and create an environment like 110%. But to another flip side, I also would love to have I would also love to work with, a majority, right?
Sure.
So now you understand what minority looks like. Now you understand what I can explain to you and what you can explain to me of how we can collaborate in different manners, right?
Yep.
Because we have athletes of different backgrounds who are minorities. Our athletes are minorities. They're female. By far, they're already a minority.
Yep.
And if they're a different ethnicity, now they're a whole nother category, right? And now if I have somebody who is a majority, who's only worked with majorities, right? Whatever that looks like, whether it's just being a male, being Caucasian, or whatever the lineage is, like, do you know how to work in that atmosphere? And if you don't, can I teach you? Can I now give you a different perspective on it?
Yeah.
Because I think as minorities, we push for minorities. We push for those who aren't, who don't feel as equal, right?
Yeah.
And like, hell yeah, I want to do that. But I feel like it's also my duty on the flip side to help educate in every and all aspects that I can. And so it's a double-edged sword when we're working this. So anytime I talk to anybody, I obviously want the candidate to be, and this is just speaking on our GA ship, right?
Sure.
Like I want them to be the best they can, open-minded, XYZ, but also help either that minority try to show what it's like to be in this field, to be, where I'm at with these jobs that I've had. But then I also want to guide, you know what I mean? So it's like, I get it. It's hard. And I hope that whoever I get to work with and whoever decides they want to work with me, that I can bring them as much information from a female, minority, or, whatever it looks like. But, and I say this too, like being a female anywhere is hard.
Yeah.
And I think people forget that because that question gets asked, right? Like what's like being a female and a male?
Sure.
Being a female is hard. Like living in a female body is hard.
Yeah. Way harder than what I have no idea. And you guys are incredible. I'm just going to say it. No, I'm serious. I'm serious.
And that's not to say like I know what it's like to be a male. I really don't. But I know what it's like to be catcalled. I know what it's like to be like talked to like I'm just supposed to go clean and cook. I won't say where, but I was at an institution working for them. And I was told, just go get me a Coke, honey. And I was like, right. And I snapped back. Please fire me.
Yeah.
Don't care.
Yeah.
And so would you say that to your male? Like I get called sweetheart all the time.
Really?
I hate it. I tweeted a while ago and it was just funny, like the Slack or the people commenting or the type of people commenting. I was like, I hate when I'm picking something up and doing something where a man feels like they have to say, hey, sweetheart, let me help you. Like, do I mind the help? No. Like, I really don't. Like, for sure. But it's just the intent behind it, right? It's because I'm a female, sweetheart, I'll do your work. Like, when you feel oppressed consistently, like you almost have this chip that you have to prove people wrong. And at least I'm speaking for myself. Sure. And so I will continue to have that chip that I need to prove everybody wrong. When I need help, I'll ask for help. Until then, I'm going to do my shit. And that's kind of how I, in a long-winded answer, feel about being a female and male-dominated industry. I think you can look at any industry and say the exact same thing. Lawyer, a doctor. I think maybe nurses might not because there's a lot of female nurses or therapists, right? Home working at a hospice or something of that nature. Like it's just very like, let me show you that I'm able to do a job, female or not. Like I can get things done. So do I want to be hired because I can relate 110%, but I also want to be hired because I can do a really good job.
Yeah, because you're the best person for the job,
Right.
Yeah, and I agree with you. It's interesting. One of my roommates, she's the women's basketball coach here, and she's a minority. And I live with two women, and it's really interesting to just have discussions with them, you know, about different thought processes, how things were received, lifestyle, just kind of all of that is interesting. And when I lived in Georgia, when I was active duty for the Army, I also had a roommate, and she was a black female as well. And she was awesome. Like, I got along with them great. Like, I have such a great relationship with them. But they're awesome people. But it's so interesting to just have conversation about the differences, because I grew up in the Midwest. You know, I'm obviously a white male. For those of you that are watching on or listening to Spotify, if you know follow me, you know that obviously. But you know, I was raised essentially just to help everybody, right? And it wasn't because of like because somebody is this or that. It was like the Minnesota nice, the Midwestern, like help everybody, put good things out into the world, and good things come back to you. And it's just really interesting to hear everybody's different perspective. And I agree with you that I think we're better as a diverse staff. My experience in the military, working with everybody from under the sun, is incredible, because you're put in a position of leadership as an officer, and your platoon can range from 17, 18-year olds, from any ethnicity to any gender, to 40 plus year olds of any ethnicity and any gender, that are all in different stages of life. And you have to learn to figure out how to lead all of those people, is really unique and interesting. And then the same thing from, strength and conditioning perspective, right? Like, obviously, if you're working with a particular team, your men's basketball, women's basketball, you name the sport, doesn't matter. But you have men or women of all ethnicities, in this particular age range that you're working with, and you have to learn to relate to all of them and communicate with all of them. And then you got coaching staffs, and then you got administration, and then you got I think it's so interesting, and I think we can learn so much from each other, and having those conversations and building an environment, which is kind of the last thing I think that we should touch on too, is building the environment of communication. Because if I say one thing, you might take it as a different way, right? And if you say one thing, I might take it as a different way, and just kind of like how words mean things, right? But also not just the words, but the way that we say them as well. And I find that very interesting. It's so unique to me, how that works. And if you can kind of touch and expand on that a little bit I know we were talking a little bit prior to even recording, but how we can create an environment where communication is, well received with each other, and that it's not taken maliciously, if that makes sense. And it's an encouraging, supportive environment, rather than read between the lines, if you will. You know what I'm saying? So if you can kind of expand on that a little bit.
Yeah, definitely. I think the biggest thing with that is being consistent in what you say and what you want.
Yeah.
So when you're talking to a group, or you're talking to your team, or you're talking amongst your staff, what that consistency looks like. So this is what I expect of us. This is what's going on, and this is how it's going. And I think also, like, in that instance, when something is happening, obviously, unless it's the situation doesn't call for it, or it's not the right time, like, that person needs to know they're doing something wrong, right? I think letting things fly and then circling around later to kind of hint at it is going to create big issues. And I also think, like, feedback of when someone's doing a good job, I think, is extremely important. I know the saying goes like, "Oh, if they're not telling me anything, I must be doing a good job." Which, when you build trust with the staff for a long period of time, sure, you're working with somebody for 5+ years and they're not saying anything, like, they're doing a good job. Cool. You've already built that trust. You've built what they need.
Right.
So that shouldn't have to be said, right? But when you have a fairly new staff and you have a fairly new team, being able to constantly give that feedback of, hey, this is where we're going. This is what's good. We're doing a good job in this direction. And I think it's that constant communication. I think that a lot of times there's this lack of awareness of what that looks like and what that might be, right? Like, we're like, oh, I communicated, but in reality, they don't understand.
Yeah.
Is a big thing. And then asking for feedback, but honest feedback, and feedback where you don't justify why you did something, right? So, so and so if I'm asking my GA, hey, what could I have done better? What's going on? This, that, and the other. And he's like, he says, well, I think, you didn't give me that much time to address the team, and I don't feel like I was able to program, It's not me being like, well, it's because, right? Mm-hmm. Because now I'm invalidating everything he just said.
Sure.
So it's just, sitting, just being like, I hear you. I understand. Like, this, that, and the third, letting it all play out and just, working from there. I think if you want to justify exactly why that happened, sure, it might be necessary. But for the most part, I feel like you ask for the feedback. So, like, let it come to you, let it fester, and then either circle about it later that day or kind of direction into what you guys are both looking for to make sure that everybody's in conjunction to what we're talking about. It's not easy, especially when you have a staff of, I think we have a staff of 15.
Sure.
So if I'm using our staff for example, like, everyone's communication is different. Everybody addresses things different. Some people like confrontation, some people don't. Some people rather meet once a year and call it good, where others rather meet every 20 minutes. And so, like, being able to navigate through that, and I think leaders that do a really good job in their programs will identify that and be honest with when someone's doing a good job, when someone's not, addressing it, how to get to the end goal of whatever that looks like. And I think communication is not easy. It's really easy to talk about nothing. For an hour.
That's so true. And like the mandatory, like, we got to have a meeting on this day at this time, like, and it's got to be an hour. Oh, that drives me insane. I'm just like, if this can be 10 minutes, this is going to be 10 minutes, right? Like, and I'm going to use my experience in the military with this because we are the absolute worst at wasting people's time, and we're terrible at it. So anybody that's in the military, anybody that works for the government, that. We'll have a meeting, and every meeting is scheduled for an hour, no matter what. And we will waste that entire hour, even if we only talk about what we need to talk about for 5 minutes. And it's just like, look, I got other things I need to be doing, and sitting here kind of BS and just is not one of them, right? Like, I don't mind small talk. I love relationships. I love that aspect. But look, if this can be 10 minutes, it can be 10 minutes. And it's really funny because I'm just going to flip this real fast and then we could probably finish up. But like, if you look at the most successful people in the world, and you can measure success however you want, I'm going to use it in a monetary value here. Their meetings are like 5 to 10 minutes to 15 minutes. And they're like, think about it. If you have one meeting that's an hour long, well, you just 4x'd how much work you can do if they were all 15 minutes, right? Or maybe more than that. My math is off. But like, boom, there you go. Like, you just double, triple, quadruple, whatever it is, how much work you can get done if it's just 15 minutes. Hey, look, tell me what I need to know. Tell me the so what. Awesome. Great. Let's go. And then we can have small talk, wherever else. But I think we do a great job at wasting time.
Ray Dalio has a good book, Principles, that kind of talks about it and how he became a really good CEO or high power man. That you can, he talks about family and work, and I think it's a really good book.
It's a really thick book too, isn't it? It's like 600 pages, right?
It's something. I just remember going through it like, damn, I'm not done yet. But no, it's a good book. It's really good.
Yeah. Well, speaking of time, I do want to be respectful of your time and the listeners' time. So, any last closing thoughts before we get out of here?
No.
Cool.
I don't believe I do.
Awesome. Well, Vic, I just want to say thank you. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your thoughts. I think a lot of things that you said today was extremely powerful, and people will get a lot from this. And if you guys need to, go back, re-listen, re-watch, because I think she said some extremely powerful things that can help you, not only with your athletes, but your relationships as a whole as well. Guys, if you got something from this, do us a huge favor, like, comment, share, subscribe, send this to a friend. That's the only way that the show grows. So really appreciate that. Vic, thank you so much for your time, and look forward to talking to you in the future as well.
Awesome. Appreciate it. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, thank you.